This is the remains of a Franciscan friary that has been excavated beneath the streets of downtown Aalborg. This would have been the cellar of the friary, and they believe that the friars used it as some sort of storage. The roof of this place is actually missing, but would have consisted of a vaulted ceiling to support the floors above it, and the vaulting would have been supported by that column in the center, along with some core bowing, which you can see in the walls. Looking in here, there's actually a artist rendering of what this place would have looked like when it was in operation. It would have been a hallway with a bunch of those vaulted arches. So if you see at the top of this image, there's those four-way vaulted arches. That's what this place would have looked like and would have supported the monastery, which would have been located on top of this. So this is basically the basement. Think about the basement of a modern cathedral. That's effectively what this was. And next to that, you can see there's actually what used to be a stairwell there. So this stairwell would have led from this basement into the main building. Another view of the stairwell. And this, I believe this would be facing south, so the stairwell would be exiting to the south of here. And it would have led through that archway there back into that main room that I showed you before. So the main room with the column in the center. And you can see the brickwork is actually the original flooring and the original brickwork of the monastery. I believe it's actually a friary, not a monastery, but I'm not completely certain what the difference is between the two. But you can actually make out, there's the two stairs, and then you can make out the mortar work where the rest of the stairs would have been as it went up to the next floor. And there's also excavated remains of a deceased person who would have been buried, probably a member of the friary, who would have been buried in these vaults. There's actually quite a few corpses down here. I guess this would have been where the friars buried their dead. This is interesting. This is actually some old skeletons they excavated, and you can actually see some of the injuries that the harsh medieval life would have caused. So here you have a jawbone, and if you notice there's actually a recess in the jawbone, which would have been caused probably by something like cavity or something like that. So dental hygiene in the Middle Ages was not what it is right now. So they had no way of filling in or treating those. And that probably would have hurt the poor guy. And below that you have a shoulder bone that would have been cracked, it would have been healed. A collarbone actually, so it would have been cracked and it would have been healed, and they show that this is actually healed up pretty nicely. They also show backbone, and see if I can get it from this angle here. This guy would have had a really big hunch to him, so his back would have been probably strained over an entire life worth of lifting heavy objects. They also show next to it a shoulder bone. So the shoulder here was dislocated and would have never actually reset, and that would have been a pretty painful injury. It's also a leg, and I imagine the leg could have had the exact same problem as the shoulder bone, where it was dislocated from its joint and it never actually was fully reset. Next to it, there's a pair of carved stone blocks. So that looks like it actually could have been the image of one of the friars. And next to that's probably some type of knight or horse or something of that nature. And this is a close-up of one of the tombs. So this would have been the remains of one of the friars who was buried here. An interesting thing is this body actually looks like it's in decent shape. Not sure if you can see the teeth, but the teeth look like they're all there and all intact. Doesn't look like there's any really major broken bones or anything of that nature. But you can see how they put him in this brick pit right here, so this burial pit. I guess it would have been the medieval equivalent of a coffin or a casket in today's age. And one more look at the tomb. You can see from the front here, it looks like all of his teeth are intact, and it looks like his teeth are actually in pretty good shape, none missing. You can also see the brickwork of the tomb as well. And this is the sedimentation which actually makes up the bedrock of Aalborg. And this gives you a good idea of what the dirt that surrounded this place looks like. And you can see all of the different stones and artifacts that would be buried in this dirt. So basically when they have an old city like this, they have effectively a landfill that's created by centuries worth of depositing things, stones, garbage, even some bones down here, and burying them. So under any of these old cities, you'll find layers upon layers of these remains like this. There's a brick over there. I think that's that hollow thing. There's a bone or something. There's some guy's legs sticking out there. This is actually very interesting. This is a look at the seals that they would have used to seal letters. So you see there's actually a letter right here, would have been written by one of the friars, and there's, to the bottom is the wax seal that would have been used to seal the letter. And over here we have the remains of some of the, I believe they're made of copper, the copper used to cast the seals. So they would have dunked these copper symbols into the wax and used them to create the seal, so you actually know who wrote the letter. And since the seal isn't broken, you know that the letter is authentic and hasn't been tampered with. This is actually something that's really interesting. I kind of wonder if maybe today we should do something similar to this, give each person their own seal. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be secure in today's age, and it would be very easy to fabricate these things, but still, the idea of each person having their own individual seal seems like it would be kind of interesting. See that seal on the top? That is the seal of, it says Friar Jacob John, and the seal looks like there's a shield on it. That shield down there looks like it has probably some type of column or something like that. And you notice all these seals are, at least most of them are broken. So maybe when someone died, they broke the person's seal so no one could forge their signature effectively. So that's the seal of Olaf Mortensen. And there's, next to it, there's a wax that's been sealed with it. And that's actually the same guy who wrote this letter and so that should be the exact same seal right down there as, yeah, that's the exact same seal with the shield in the center. So if you notice this seal over here has this shield in the center. This letter was written by the exact same person, and we know that because there's this exact same symbol with the shield there in that seal. Interesting. No idea what it says since it's written in probably Latin or possibly Danish or some ancient form of Danish. I'm not really sure. I can't read either of them, so I won't be able to read a word of this. But yeah, I'm sure somebody has translated. This will be actually interesting to see what the translation of this actually is, but they don't provide that. These are some old combs that were excavated from here. It's actually interesting to see some of these human artifacts that we actually would recognize today. obviously were constructed of different material, but they serve exactly the same purpose. And that's, I believe it says it's a belt buckle. There's a crucifix. Not completely certain what those two stones over there, it says it's something relating to a loom, but I'm not completely certain. And that there is a crucible that was used to cast bronze. So this piece over there, and that says it's a couple of ingots. And I'm not completely certain what these are. They look like they were the remains of some type of pottery. So broken pieces of pottery. And one more look at the main room. And you can see a couple of interesting things. That there is actually the base of what would have been a window. So even though this was a cellar, there would have been windows which would let natural light into this. And that outlet over there actually, they believe, would have housed some type of candle to provide additional light. And that, you see that brickwork in the center there, that's actually a later addition. So there used to be another staircase located there and possibly a door. And the monks would have bricked up that to close it off when they made some changes to this place. I believe they added another addition and this doorway was no longer needed. There might have been actually at the same time that they added the stairs. So they replaced this doorway with these stairs, which would be located right next to them. Another interesting thing, if you notice the way the floor is, or the way the wall is set up, it's set up so there's those large stones at the very base and then brickwork above them in order to add support. And you can also see the tiling of the floor. And this is a diorama of what the place would have looked like originally. So that would have been the church that would have been located on top of this place, so the friary. I imagine it's arranged in the same orientation as the place, as the cellar, so that would have been, to the right would have been the south and the left would have been the north. And the arched vaults in the main room would be under that main building right there. And this exposed stone here would have been the foundation of the monastery. So the monastery would have been built on these large piles of stone. So what they would have done is they would have dug up the basement below the church, and they would have dumped these stones in there, poured concrete between them so that you can see these stones. There's actually mortar between them. And this rough stonework would have formed the base which they built the church on. And this image actually gives you some good idea of how the base of the church, the foundation of the church was constructed. So these stones at the bottom would have corresponded to that stonework that I showed you earlier. And then they would have put a layer of bricks beneath that, and then they would have constructed the stones, the tiling for the wall. So these large tiles would have probably been equivalent to the large tiles in the main room that I showed you earlier. And then they would have constructed the wall based on that. So the wall probably would have been some type of brickwork, or I believe it says here they use yellow stone for the wall. So not completely certain. I don't really see any yellow stone here, but yeah, that's how they would have constructed the foundation of this monastery. And this is the street above where the monastery is located. That elevator there is actually what takes you down to the monastery.